Good morning. I'm Zane David Meminger, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. This morning I'm joined by Ron Davis, Director, Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, also known as the COPS Office. The COPS Office is a component within the United States Department of Justice dedicated to the concept that trust and mutual respect between the police and the communities they serve is critical to public safety. The COPS Office mission is to advance public safety through community policing, a law enforcement philosophy that focuses on community partnerships, problem solving, and organizational transformation. I'm also joined here this morning by the Mayor of Philadelphia, Michael Nutter, and also the Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. In May 2013, Police Commissioner Ramsey requested an independent review by the United States Department of Justice into the use of deadly force by the Philadelphia Police Department. In response, the COPS Office conducted a comprehensive review, which included numerous site visits to meet with police department officials and community stakeholders, to conduct observations, and to collect data. Today, Director Ron Davis is here to announce the findings and recommendations of that comprehensive review as set forth in the report entitled Collaborative Reform Model and Assessment of Deadly Force in the Philadelphia Police Department. Recognizing that we cannot arrest our way out of the crime problems facing Philadelphia, my office has spent the last 5 years trying to build relationships with the community in the interest of community safety. While those efforts in places such as Strawberry Mansion of Philadelphia and the 22nd Police District have contributed to the reduction of violent crime in the city, there's much work to be done. Unfortunately, a significant hurdle in these efforts is bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community in terms of trust. Based on my experience as United States Attorney, the only way to bridge that gap is for all of us to start talking to one another rather than shouting at one another, as there are many pieces to the puzzle that impact community safety. Those pieces include poverty, struggling schools, and lack of job opportunities, in addition to the day-to-day work of police officers who simply want to return home safely at the end of their shift. In January of this year, Attorney General Eric Holder was here to meet with the community stakeholders and law enforcement officials at a Building Community Trust Roundtable. I found that conversation very valuable, and it reinforced my belief that all parties need to engage in self-reflection and honest debate if we are truly going to figure out the best way to keep our community safe in an environment in which all people, community members, and law enforcement officers are treated fairly and with mutual respect. Hopefully today's announcement will further the effort to move Philadelphia towards that goal. I'll now turn it over to Director Ron Davis.
Good morning, and let me start by thanking our U.S. Attorney, Zane Meminger, for his leadership and for hosting us today. Let me also start, if I may, on behalf of the Department of Justice, offer our condolences to the police department, the Philadelphia community, and the family of Officer Robert Wilson, who obviously was tragically shot and killed several weeks ago. And I learned this morning that it's now Sergeant Robert Wilson, so that's great. We want to start with that. As mentioned, as the U.S. Attorney mentioned, in 2013, the Commissioner, Charles Ramsey, asked the Department of Justice to take a critical look at the policies and practices of the Philadelphia Police Department with regards to the use of deadly force. Now, the goal of the review, he asked, was to identify areas that were in need of improvement and to provide recommendations on how to achieve best practices in those areas. Now, before I get to the actual findings, I do want to take a moment, a pause, to really to appreciate and understand what I just said as far as the ask. I want to kind of repeat myself. The Commissioner asked us to come in. This was not a federal mandate. This was not an investigation of the police department. This was a voluntary assessment of what is working, what is not working, and how do we become better as a police department. I focus on that because as we work to build trust in all of our communities across this country, the first part of trust is having the courage to acknowledge what's working and what's not working, primarily what's not working, and then having the wherewithal and the capacity to make sure you implement those things to make it work. So I do start off by really applauding the leadership of the Commissioner and the Police Department for having the courage to take an introspective look. I mean, when you think about it, the police commissioner asked the federal government to take a look at its policies, practices, training, investigations on the use of deadly force, and asked us to take a critical look. And so, as the old phrase goes, we know the truth hurts, but I think we all recognize selective ignorance is fatal. And the inability to do introspective looks will only lead to further loss of public trust and confidence. So we think that's a very positive thing. Now, we spent the last year taking that look, as requested by the commissioner, to identify what is and what is not working. And we also took just a critical look to see what are the recommendations that we could provide to help the Philadelphia Police Department. So as you'll see in the report, we've identified 48 findings that do identify what we would call serious deficiencies in some key areas with regards to the use of force. First, with regards to the use of force policies, we also believe that there are deficiencies with regards to training in the use of force, both in the basic academy and in service. We are making definitely strong recommendations that there be an established field training program, which does not exist at this moment. We found some deficiencies and inconsistency with supervision and operational control, if you will, of officer-involved shooting investigations and crime scenes. And with regards to oversight and accountability, we noticed there was some room for improvement. In particular, we would really strongly encourage that the police department fully cooperate with the Police Advisory Commission in sharing its data and its information so that that commission can do the job that has been mandated to do. So once again, the areas that these were core areas. You have the report in front of you with the key findings, but the core areas we saw deficiencies were use of force policies, overall training with regards to use of force, no field training program, deficient and inconsistent supervision of officer-involved investigations. Just for an example, the one that stands out the most would be that the department is still taking typed statements or interviews from officers versus audio or videotapes. And we believe that makes it more of a summary statement than the exact statement from the officer. And we also believe that there's ways to better have transparency by engaging the Police Advisory Commission and by making sure that there's accountability not just within the department but outside as well. And there's more with each of these topical areas that you'll see. There's some 48 findings that we've identified. Now, in addition to those 48 findings, which are what we would say the areas that are needed improvement, the areas that the commissioner asked us to identify, our experts through CNA, who are here today, which will be available to answer any questions, also provided 91 recommendations to help the Philadelphia Police Department achieve best practices. And I have to say that many of these the commissioner has already started working on, and so this is not like it's an end and then start, that some of this is already in progress. But with those 91 recommendations, I would end my part by saying that the Department of Justice is not just here to make this assessment, to identify deficiencies, but we will continue to work with the Philadelphia Police Department over the next 18 months. And during that period of time, we will help them implement those 91 recommendations. We will also provide 2 progress reports to the department and to the community. One 6 months from, I won't say exactly from today, but roughly from today, we will do a progress report that will identify for the department and the community their progress in implementing those 91 recommendations. And then 1 year after that report, we'll do a final report that will advise the department and the community where the Philadelphia Police Department is at with regards to implementing such recommendations. I would say this, Philadelphia is the 3rd department in the nation to ask for this review. We've done review in Las Vegas, as you know, collaborative reform. The second review was Spokane, Washington, then Philadelphia. Since that point, we're now in Baltimore. We are in St. Louis County, which also includes the Ferguson region. We are in I mentioned Spokane. We are in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We just announced Salinas about 2 weeks ago. I'm looking over to my staff. Did I miss anyone here? And we'll be making some future announcements in the road for more. And so this concept of asking for a voluntary assessment is relatively new. We think it is one of the strong components of police reform in this country. We believe that when you have leadership, it does make a difference. And let me just close by saying how we select sites. So a couple of things in deciding whether or not we would accept the collaborative reform from the Philadelphia Police Department. One, it had to be voluntary. It is not Department of Justice, COPS office cannot impose an investigation. We are a training and technical assistance arm of the government. We provide grants to advance community policing. So it has to be voluntary. 2, it has to be more than a department that thinks it has deficiencies. We have to have confidence that the leadership, not just the police department, but the elected leadership as well, is committed to reform and that our efforts are just a small portion of an overall reform effort. And that's what we saw here with Mayor Nutter and with Commissioner Ramsey. And we have to have confidence that the department has the capacity to actually implement the changes. Otherwise, we're just setting them up for failure. So when we decided to accept the invitation from the commissioner, it was with a lot of confidence already in their ability to do what they said they would do. And as we now proceed forward with these 91 recommendations, I do want the Philadelphians and the community to know that we will be standing side by side with the department. We will be helping them. We have confidence that they will do the right thing and do the implementation, and that we will provide those progress reports to the community. Thank you very much.
Next up will be the Mayor of Philadelphia.
U.S. Attorney Zane Meminger, thank you very, very much for again hosting us in this announcement, as you did, of course, as you mentioned. U.S. Attorney General, Eric Holder was here not too long ago, and Commissioner Ramsey and I and a number of others participated in that session. To the Cops Office Director Ron Davis, thank you for your continued leadership and partnership. We've worked together from your day one, and we have benefited from your commitment and leadership on down from, of course, Attorney General Holder and President Barack Obama. A couple of the city officials you'll hear from, of course, Commissioner Ramsey in a second, Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, and my Chief of Staff, Everett Gillison, who has overall responsibility for public safety in the city, and Director of Public Safety, Mike Resnick. Let me start also by acknowledging the authors of the report. We've had the opportunity to touch base with them, George Faulkner and Stephen Carter. I want to thank them for their diligence, their focus, their commitment to trying to help the department while sharing critical information, not critical in the sense of the department's practices, but important information for us to have as we seek to move forward. And certainly, as with any report, there is some criticism, which we acknowledge but take in the most professional manner. As the U.S. Attorney mentioned, or maybe rather it was Director Davis, let me say that I want to express regrets for all who have either been shot or killed in Philadelphia, citizens and police officers, because we are a city that believes that all life is precious. The day-to-day ongoings on our streets, whether it's civilian on civilian or a police officer with a civilian, the unfortunate reality here in this city and cities all across the United States of America is that needlessly, in some instances, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are killed on the streets of America. The overwhelming majority, unfortunately, are citizen-to-citizen encounters, but there are, in fact, police-citizen encounters that result in either injury or death. Every life is precious in this city and this country, and so we need to maintain that level of focus. Second, every day, in my view at least, every day is another day to do better than we did yesterday in every department, in every agency, in every component of this city government and governments all across the country. And so when we look at the report, and I've had the report, read through the report, had discussion about the report, and I certainly look forward to working with Commissioner Ramsey, Deputy Mayor Gillison, Director Resnick, in putting together a plan of action and dealing with the recommendations of reform within the Philadelphia Police Department. I think, as Director Davis already mentioned, many of the proposed recommendations or action items are already in the implementation stage by Commissioner Ramsey, and you'll hear from him about that. It's very important for the Philadelphia Police Department to have such a clear plan as Commissioner Ramsey and his team move forward to review and reform procedures, policies, and protocols around policing in general, but especially in the critical area of use of force and officer-involved shootings. As with all levels and agencies within our government, we strive to be both ethical and transparent in our work, and this is the case here as well. We will examine fully this report and work on a realistic approach for implementation of the recommendations as quickly as possible. but it again bears repeating, and the two previous speakers have mentioned it, but I also want to acknowledge as well. Commissioner Ramsey, as usual, was in the forefront of trying to create change and asked the cops office to come to Philadelphia. Ask them. It's very, very important. I believe that Commissioner Ramsey, also the co-chair of President Barack Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, will of course tackle this challenge the same way he has tackled every challenge that he's confronted, with diligence, tenacity, and integrity. As we both have said many, many times before, there needs to be an end to any idea of us versus them mentality in our city. We're one big city. Everyone wants to be safe. Citizens want to be safe. Police officers want to be safe as well. When I became mayor in 2008 and brought this great man to our city as a commissioner, we instituted a community policing strategy in Philadelphia to change the way police interact with our community. We've also seen over the years dramatic reductions in homicide, violent crime, and a number of police-related actions. We wanted to change the perception of police in our neighborhoods and communities, that they could not be seen as just working in a neighborhood. They could not ostracize or treat citizens with contempt, and they could not just literally drive by in their vehicles, allowing little or no interaction with our citizens. If you've been to one of our police graduations, you've heard Commissioner Ramsey say many, many times, congratulations to the officers. Make sure you have good shoes and great insoles. You will be walking a beat for a long time before you see a vehicle, because we want the officers to know people in the communities where they serve. In the past, that kind of hands-off policing, quite frankly, does nothing to foster positive relationships or trust. So we went back, in some instances, to an old way of policing. Better training for our officers, increased foot patrols, and greater community engagement. We'll continue this work through the recommendations submitted by the DOJ Cops Office and the authors of this report, and bring our city one step closer to being that much safer for everyone, at home, at school, at work, and on our streets, for our citizens and our officers. Police work is very important. Police work is very dangerous. Police work can foster critical community relationships, and police work is public safety, community engagement, and citizen trust, all leading to a safer Philadelphia and the development of trusting relationships by citizens of good, honest, and professional police officers. And our police officers will encounter citizens who want safer communities, who cooperate with the police, and who respect and appreciate the great work of our brave men and women in uniform each and every day. We will work diligently to continue the path of this report and follow up on its recommendations to get them implemented as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mayor. And now Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey.
Thank you, sir. Let me start by thanking the COPS office, Ron Davis in particular, for taking this on. And most importantly, Mayor Nutter, before asking COPS to come in, I had a conversation with the mayor to talk about my thoughts around this particular issue, and he, without hesitation, supported me in reaching out to the COPS office. Without that, it simply would not have happened. It all came about, quite frankly, as a result of the work in Las Vegas. I had a chance to read the Las Vegas report, and when I read it, I saw a lot of issues that I felt was very similar to some of the issues we were grappling with here in Philadelphia, and we needed a third-party independent review in order to come up with the kind of concrete recommendations that we needed in order to really move forward. George and Steve, George Faulkner, Steve Carter, who are seated here with us here today, and other members of the COPS staff and CNA did an excellent job, I think, in researching the department, understanding how things get done, how things could be improved. And I think that when you read this report, and I'm very excited about it. It's a good report with a lot of solid recommendations that, as the mayor mentioned, we're already in the process of implementing some of them, but we certainly are looking at each and every one and coming up with a strategy for implementation. Captain Jackie Pittman, who's in the back there, has been charged with the responsibility of overseeing and making sure that these things are taking place. We're in the process now of identifying various deputies that I have and who's going to be in charge of the various areas that where we need to implement. We're creating a matrix to be able to easily follow the finding, the recommendation, who is in charge of overseeing the implementation, any cost that's associated with that particular recommendation, so that, and if there's any cross-reference to the Presidential Task Force report, because we're really doing both together. We've taken a look at the task force report, which did not focus solely on police. There are a lot of recommendations beyond police, but those that are relevant to police are going to be incorporated into one large matrix for implementation purposes. So, as the mayor mentioned, these changes don't happen overnight, but we're going to push as hard as we can and make substantial progress over the next few months. And I'm very optimistic that we'll get an awful lot accomplished. One last thing, I've had a very good experience with the Department of Justice, and I really do appreciate their support. For me, it goes back beyond just 2013. In 1998, when I was chief in Washington, D.C., I asked the Justice Department to come in and review that department. That was before collaborative reform. I mean, that was, I think, the first time that had ever been done, I'm told. And the then Attorney General Janet Reno and her top deputy Eric Holder, current Attorney General, responded very positively. We worked very hard and made a lot of changes, and it totally transformed that department. So I really encourage chiefs around the country to take advantage of what's going on now, this collaborative reform. We can always improve, and that's really what it's all about. It's about continually trying to improve, and there's no area more important than an officer's use of force whenever they are in a situation where they need to resort to force. So I want to thank again DOJ for everything that they've done. Thank you.